I'm Paul Fox from the Local Government Management Agency, recently merged Local Government Computer Services Board and Management Services Board. We cover, and if you're familiar enough with the engineering solutions we would have had from the LGCSB over recent years in the GIS area, it was cross-platform in terms of different types of systems and covering the main functional areas of the local authority departments in terms of transport, environment, water, planning, etc. So the project I want to talk about today is the MapRoad PMS, which is Pavement Management System, which is pavement management as in asset management, which is kind of the flavour of recent years in terms of being able to make use of the available funds and the reduced funding that is available from the Department of Transport, in this particular case, the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport. So I just covered these few topics in brief, and from project sponsor down to where we are at the moment and what we are expecting to happen over the next couple of years. The Department of Transport are the main driver, if you like, for these particular types of projects in terms of asset management. The Department's responsibilities are mainly the legal framework relating to the provision and maintenance of the national, regional, local roads. So it's specifically to do with the regional and local roads in terms of the funding that this particular project comes under. They share some of the legal framework, obviously, with the NRA, and the NRA have recently taken over the grant management or the fund management for the regional and local roads from the Department of Transport, although the department still maintain an overall brief in terms of auditing and the finances that would accrue from that. The local authorities in Ireland are responsible for around 91,000 kilometres of local and regional roads. Okay, so we're talking 94% of the network. We tend to think of the big money going into the national road network, but obviously we're talking about 6% there. It's big money, big capital projects. So the remainder of what the local authority are directly responsible for in terms of the maintenance and the upkeep of those roads, we're talking 94%. So it's a significant amount to cover and to manage in terms of an asset in itself. And in 2011, the figures were of the order of over 450 million that was divvied up around the country to the local authorities to assist them in maintaining it. It doesn't cover the full cost. Local authorities are obviously covering a certain amount of the maintenance of their own network for the regional locals out of their own revenue budgets, which is a very difficult thing to manage in the current climate. The business case, as with all funded projects coming from government departments now, in terms of the business case is the primary starting point, and you have to be able to prove or ensure that the funding that you're going to get is going to be well spent and is going to accrue a benefit over the coming 5-10 years. So the main drivers in terms of for what the local authorities are, I mean, they're responsible for maintaining the asset, obviously enough, but then getting the maximum value from all available budgets that are available to them. Okay, and then ensuring political accountability is there in terms of there is a lot of pressure on local authorities which would come from various different sources, either from the public, from their own internal departments themselves, from what's the likes of the department and the NRA and interested groups across the sector are, and obviously from politicians themselves. The elected representatives will obviously be in a position to put pressure on local authorities to ensure that the money that's spent or that's allocated for a particular area will go to where they want it to be. So the purpose for having any pavement management system really is to ensure that when you look for the money, that you can put forward a good business case to say that money will be, how it will be spent, and not just that, to be able to provide proof or evidence that the money that you have spent or that the local authority has spent has been well spent, and that there are some kind of performance indicators to ensure that, yes, the performance of the asset has indeed improved. Okay, so the goals and deliverables. We've had GIS systems in local authorities for, going back probably to the early and mid-90s, and they have evolved, and technology, the various different versions of software that's been there has gone through numerous ones. I think in the early days of MapRoad, we were talking about MapRoad version 3, we're now up to MapRoad 11.5. So there's a significant advancement in what's going on there. Similarly with database technologies as well, we're up to spatial databases now, which is probably one of the key points of the latest MapRoad PMS project, and that we've been able to move from flat native GIS data sets to fully integrated databases with spatial capabilities. The ICT choices and challenges for ourselves and for our partners in Compass who are doing the development is to try and limit the expenditure that will be required on the local authority once we implement a system. And this was one of these difficult cases where we were going to make the move away from what we traditionally had to make use of open source GIS systems as opposed to just using the desktop systems that we already had. But it's never a case of being in a position to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. There's a desktop system in place, it's well used, there's a lot of data in it. You don't want to just throw it out and redevelop it again in a new environment. So trying to limit those costs. But with those decisions, it does mean that there can be costs incurred by local authorities on a resources side, which are becoming scarcer and scarcer, obviously, within IT and engineering departments. And then on the software licensing side, and anybody's familiar with the public procurement end of things in terms of efforts that have been made to try and cut down on these costs of licensing in terms of moving to open source, which is why this was very attractive to us, and to have conversations and research projects with Compass in terms of trying to figure out, can we do this? Can we make this move away from the environment and the platforms we have or have had up to date? So what we found is that not in one fell swoop. Okay, we still have our desktop system, but the idea is to limit the amount of data editing that's happening on the desktop system and move it into a new environment, basically the browser application environment. So there was a few choices to be made in terms of changing versions of desktop software. Making the move to SQL Server 2008 was, a significant change for local authorities because we were one of the early projects to do that, and it did require new infrastructure. Most of the licensing was there, but we're at a key juncture now in terms of licensing agreements with the likes of Microsoft and the rest. Most local authorities were in a Microsoft licensing agreement up to particular versions, to which, nationally we've more or less bought out of across the local government sector. So future advances of the software will have to look at the likes of other open source technologies in terms of databases, and can they take on the open source capabilities that we're looking for. So as it stands, where we are is we have a system which is being rolled out, and Seth gave you a quick look at it earlier on. I won't go into the detail of what's there, but basically it's using the underlying road schedule, which is the building block in terms of all road software, which is in the desktop system. It's putting it onto a browser-based environment so that it can be used across the entire local authority without any repercussions for additional GIS or software licenses. It's making use of data that is coming from other sources and using web services. I mean, one of the greatest advantages, I suppose, is in terms of, and I know it's been mentioned a number of times today in the OSIs and the MapGenie project, it really has revolutionised in terms of what we've been able to do with this, because again, anytime you introduce a system, you're putting quite an overhead on the IT department to facilitate, and the GIS people to facilitate updates and maps and changes to data sets. So to have the OpenStreetMap and the MapGenie background mapping available makes life a lot easier for the IT personnel, if you like, to keep up with any changes. So we have a few layers down the left. They're coming from the underlying database from the desktop system. We are adding in, and Compass are taking some of the data from the desktop system and adding more and more in. So from where we have bridge data and bridge survey data and accidents data and hazards data, all of that is in the desktop system. So delivering that on the browser system is going to be part of our next release. One of the other initiatives from the department is to, while it's important to gather the data, they wanted to limit the amount of time or the volume of data that a local authority might have to collect, because ultimately evidence-based asset management means you have to be able to show what you have, show where you want to go, and show how much it's going to cost to get there. Okay, so the idea of visual condition surveying, where it's 5-6 years ago we were talking about very detailed surveying in terms of pavement management. You're practically going out and counting potholes and percentages of road length that has age breakup or bad drainage and the like. There isn't as much capability to do that, although in fairness to the NRA, they did do a regional survey, a survey of all regional roads towards the end of 2011, including video surveys, and that's being delivered to local authorities at the moment. and can be integrated into our desktop system. So I think Andy probably showed you something earlier on an application that was developed for the Android market. So we're using it on the typical tablets, okay, the likes of the Samsung 10-inch tablet. And very straightforward, very simple utility whereby you drive down the road, you have two people, one person driving, the other person doing the actual condition surveying. So they're basically, the department commissioned a survey company to come up with a methodology to define what's a 1 and what's a 10, where 1 is, a ruined road and 10 is obviously a perfect road. And there's training going to be going on towards the end of the year in how to identify what's a 1 and what's a 10. So Compass have developed an app which will facilitate that, very straightforward. Record the data as you go. It'll get uploaded from the pilot stages to a Compass website location, and then download it back into the system. So the idea will be it'll be an extra layer for you to see where you believe the good and bad conditioning of your road is. And again, it comes back to the business case for all this. It's not collecting data for the sake of collecting data. The point is to be able to collect data to allow you to make an informed decision on where you should spend the very limited money that you have. And having done that and recorded it in a system, along with various other forms of data in terms of mechanical data, accident data, anything that's critical in terms of determining where you should do work. It's also going to be of benefit when it comes to council meetings to be able to turn to elected officials to say, you want us to do something here. The history of this particular location is that there isn't a problem. The traffic count, the footfall, or whatever else it may be, is more imperative in these areas, and that's why we're spending the money there. Okay. That's just probably been a bit of talk about web services as well. So what Compass has done for us, while we're putting data into a particular system, there'll always be the requirement to pull that data out and use it in various other formats. I mean, we do spend a lot of time encouraging people to try and keep data in one central repository or one system. But, to give, the freedom to the engineers and the technicians who have a job to do, it is important that they can get the data out and analyse it as they see fit, but to have the central repository of information in one location. Okay. The current status is we're rolling out. We've probably hit, I think, 26 or so local authorities at the moment. So there's another 8 to go, and hopefully we'll have that done through the autumn. What you can do is put in the history of works, and again, it comes back to the department circulars. They want you to be able to put in where you did your work and what interventions you did. And it sounds like it's an answer that should already be there, and in many respects it is. But it's the amount of digging and the amount of AutoCAD files and various different files you might have to go to find that answer. So the department issued circulars since last year, I think, requiring local authorities to be able to have a picture of all works history that they've done or roads programs that they've done going back over a decade and more. The Android app, which was said, is we're kind of launching it at the moment, and there's a few local authorities trialling it for us. The way it'll work is that you'll come to ourselves and you'll say we want to make use of this app. It'll be up to the local authority to procure the device, although there are a few different projects in the NRA which may release funding to buy these kind of devices. And similarly from the department, in terms of you being able to use the grant funding programme, I think they're going to allow you to be able to go off and buy a couple of these types of devices. I mean, the idea is this: it's simple enough technology. It's relatively inexpensive in terms of the device itself. I think the lads have done something so you can download the latest versions into it, so that they'll be there available on the market, or through probably a secure area, and download it and then just go off and drive it, okay, and come back with the actual results itself. The licensing system is the road opening licensing. Okay, so again, coming back to, there's a couple of reasons. This is a separate product in itself. So the MapRoad PMS we've been mentioning is a browser-based intranet system for the local authority. Okay, it's not used outside the local authority, although we are looking at having a portal for the department themselves. The second one is the road opening licensing, and there's two reasons really for trying to manage it. It's primarily a paper-based process where a utility company comes to a local authority and says, we're putting in a cable here, we need to dig a hole. They apply to the local authority for a license. The local authority applies conditions to that license in terms of traffic management, their health and safety aspects of it, gives them a duration to do it, and charges them a fee for actually making the application, and then makes them submit a bond. Okay, so we have a system in place which came from South Dublin, and a few local authorities have one of their own. So there is an initiative from the Department of Transport and the Department of Communications to have something there by the end of the year in terms of a national system, so that utility companies will only come to one place or one system, as opposed to having to apply if they're going down through a couple of different authorities and urban councils, in terms of having to apply multiple times. So that will be out, okay? Seth also mentioned the data cleanup, and it was an important exercise for us to try and clean up the data, because, you know, when you do, we're not talking about doing routing software here, but when you are trying to deal with various different systems and getting the data presented in a particular and expert manner, it will always be the case that some kind of form of data cleanup is required. That's just a picture of the Android app. I think there was a few presentations of that floating around. The customer buy-in, I mean, the difficulty, I suppose, at the start will come in anything to do with an asset management system is the users of the system. The idea was they say, well, you know, we already do this. We're not doing anything different about the way we do our work, and we're not. The asset management system doesn't do anything different about the work. It's really, again, coming back to the points of its evidential-based reporting, in terms of, if you can quantify that this is the condition of my road network today, and then you can come back in 3 years' time to say, based on the roads programmes which we submitted to the Department for funding, this is now the condition of my network, then you've proved that the money was well spent. So it's for local authority managers, it is crucial. Similarly, after we didn't have a bad winter last year, but the couple of years before, when roads were destroyed in various areas because of freezing and cracking on roads, it is the case that then, you know, in the spring months, you can go and do some kind of a survey on your roads, fairly straightforward survey, and you should be able to have quantified the unit costs for rehabilitation of networks. So you should be able to say, you know, the reasonable operating standard of this stretch of network is a 7 out of 10. It's currently a 3. And therefore, to jump from a 3 to a 7 in terms of a condition rating, you should know from a pavement management system the unit cost to upgrade that network. Make these submissions to the Department of Transport, and then in turn they will have to go to the Department of Finance to try and secure that level of funding. The road opening licensing, just to finish on a few screen grabs, is a system we have in testing phase, and we're hoping to get out to a few pilot sites, and we have a few local authorities already earmarked for that. We're looking to embed the open source GIS similarly into it, so that the applications for the utility where they're going to do the road opening will be, in the first instance, through a browser using the typical Map Genie or OpenStreetMap background mapping, and allow them to identify where they're actually going to be digging the hole, and that will allow the local authority to apply conditions to that based on where it is, and using the underlying database to see what the categories and classifications, is there bus stops, is there school routes, or is there anything critical along there, which will mean extra specific conditions are applied. How it all ties in together: MapRoad PMS on the left-hand side is a local authority intranet system. You'll have the licensing system on the right. The two should be able to talk to each other using typical web services. Nothing too complicated in terms of one system should know about future applications from utility companies. The utility companies should know what the next year's roads programme is in terms of what the local authority are planning. And then encompassing it all should be the department, in terms, and that's the next stage. We're in consultation with the NRA in terms of making life a bit easier. To date, the grant applications have gone on spreadsheets of the department. Really, we shouldn't be doing that kind of double entry. We should be able to take it directly from the pavement management system to the NRA, submit the grant, and then have a rejection or approval or editing of the priorities of the programme as it stands. The planned work, there is a review for anybody in local authorities. There is a review underway of speed limits, and I anticipate that there will be something coming from the department on that again, in terms of maybe getting into the likes of future planning for how we devise speed limits in particular areas. Roads programme stuff in terms of the tablet device that will grow and hopefully move it out. The financial expenditure reporter, the idea to be able to, following on from the asset management, the next thing we should be able to do is extract the data on the roads programme from the financial systems and the local authorities, and have it available for themselves even to monitor cash flow. I mean, it can all be done through the financial systems, but there is a significant issue with local authorities at the moment in terms of their cash flow, and is the cash available to continue with the kind of work that they're going on and being able to pay contractors and the like. So even just to be able to track that expenditure through the year based on their planned works is going to be critical over the next few years. The NRA system I've mentioned already. Implementing a centrally hosted system makes obviously perfect sense. We're not there yet because there's infrastructure issues and the fact that we're still basing on a desktop system, but testing will be going on at the end of the year to do that. And the expectations for the future, again, widening the centralised system to a portal which perhaps the department will use, portal for the NRA as well to manage grant applications and the transfer of funds, improve survey data collection techniques. I think it's a given. We won't have GIS systems which are of any benefit or use to us unless we have up-to-date data that can go into it. Okay. There's work going on the accidents end of things as well with the guards and the RSA to ensure that there's some kind of a quicker delivery of the accident statistics on minor injury, serious injury and death back to the local authorities, because currently, there's a time lag of nearly 2 years by the time they get the electronic data. Okay.